We delight in the beauty of a butterfly, but we rarely admit the changes it had to go through to achieve that beauty. Hi everyone, welcome back to So Arizona. I have got my work cut out for me today. I have got to harvest all of these shallots. I got the garlic completely harvested. I've been working on that over the last couple of weeks, but I've still got the shallots and I have my etoy onions that I have to harvest, and there are so many of them. Right now my goal is just to get them out of the ground and under my covered patio, and that way at least I know they are stable because I can spread them out and they can cure, which is just a drying process, and then I can deal with the rest of it later. But the important part is just to get them out of the ground, not only because it is past time, but also because I need this bed for something else. So that is what I'm going to be doing today while we are talking. I wanted to show you how cool these shallots are as they grow. So I planted these in November along with my garlic, and I planted one shallot, and from that one shallot I get this huge clump of shallots. There are 7 in my hand right now that have grown from that one shallot, so that is a pretty good return on investment. You know, you plant one, you get 7. So I have a lot of these shallots. So I want to show you this, but first I'm going to clean these up. I like to clip some of these dry tops off out here in the garden so that I don't have to take them up front to where I'm going to cure them and then clip them and make a mess and then only have to carry that mess back here. So I'm trying to be a little bit more efficient. I will just clip these off like this, not too short because I don't want to encourage any rot to happen. These still have quite a bit of green on these tops, so they need to dry out. But I can at least get some of the really dry, crispy tops off, first of all. So what I'm left with is this big clump, and that came just from the one shallot. So I'm digging these up, clipping some of the tops off, and putting them into this box right here, and then I'll carry them up front. I was going through some old pictures just because I was trying to find some footage of my earlier garlic harvest for another video that I'm doing, and I came across a picture of my garden in May of 2023. So that is 3 years ago. And I was so surprised by what it looked like. I think it's really amazing how quickly we get used to things and how they look. And I know that's certainly the case with my garden. And this garden, when I started, was nothing back here. It was just a compacted, bare piece of land. The soil was really bad. It was sandy, it was dry, it was hard, and there was nothing that grew back here. Even the weeds would hardly grow back here. I had a few wild amaranths and of course the flush of London rocket in the spring, but other than that, nothing grew. And I remember telling my family that I had never seen a yard that felt so dead. And that's because there were no bees, there were no butterflies, there were no insects of any kind, good or bad, and that's because there were no plants to support them. There was no habitat. Even when I look at the picture now, it was just a wide, bare stretch of ground that had no shelter for them. So they had no reason, none of the birds or the insects had any reason to be here. I was just thinking about that because I had harvested garlic this year, as I said, and the garlic harvest was the best harvest I have ever had. I grew enough garlic for my family to have garlic for an entire year, and that is curing right now, and I'm about to store that, and all of that I will talk about later on, as I said. But I was just thinking about the fact that When I first started gardening here 3 years ago in this particular space, I planted some garlic. It was just a 4-foot bed, like a 4 by 4 foot bed. So it only gave me, enough garlic for probably a couple of months. And the garlic harvest that I got was okay, but I had mostly really small bulbs that just did not develop very well, and the cloves were really tiny, if they existed at all. And it was a little bit of a fail, to be honest. And so the next year I had a little bit more luck, but I still, had some struggles with it. So over the course of the next season, I really put my heart into learning how to grow garlic, what the soil needed, what the garlic needed, how much irrigation it needed, all of those kinds of things. And it took me a while to research all of that. I made a video on it. I will link that below if you would like. And just sharing everything that I learned during that process. And so I put that into practice over the next couple of years, and fast forward to this year, and I was so happy because I got such a great harvest. So it just so happened that I found that picture of my garden in the before stage, and then I harvested all of this garlic around the same time. I felt really proud of myself that I had, tried something new and I had accomplished my goal. And just because you get a positive outcome, that is not the only reason to feel proud of yourself. You can feel proud of yourself for trying, for showing up, for putting in the effort consistently, for being persistent about things. Maybe if I had gotten an okay harvest, even a mediocre harvest, that would have been a bit of an improvement. If I had had a total fail, that would have been, an opportunity for me to show up again next year and not give up. It got me thinking about a quote from Maya Angelou, and she says that we delight in the beauty of a butterfly, but we rarely admit the changes it had to go through to achieve that beauty. I think that's so true. A lot of times we see the finished product of somebody's efforts, whether it's a business endeavor or, going to school or, some sort of a project, maybe getting into shape, and we don't think about all of the discipline that it requires to support those kinds of accomplishments. They have to show up at the gym every day. They have to attend boring business meetings. They have to do a lot of business planning. They have to take a lot of risk. You have to show up in class every day and study at night and whatever it happens to be. And in my case, I had to do a lot of research into how to grow something, and grow something in a climate that is not necessarily very hospitable to growing in. And I was able to do that. And when I put up before and after pictures of my garden as it is right now, and the before pictures, people often have really positive things to say about it. How did you do that? Or it looks so nice, and all of that. And I really appreciate those comments. But at the same time, it doesn't show all of the hours of work that it has taken to get the garden from the dusty, dry, barren spot that it was in to the point that it is now, where it is giving me a lot of food every week. There was a lot of hard work. If you've ever done any projects in the desert, you know how hot it can be. A lot of sweating and sunburns and backaches and just feeling a little overwhelmed, to be honest, about whether or not I could take it from where it was to the dream I had for it in my mind. And I think, though, that is really important to remember when you're thinking about embarking on your own gardening journey. It's that the work is hard. It's hot and it's sweaty, and there's going to be sunburn and backaches and all of those kinds of things. There are going to be failures. There are going to be times where you feel like you just can't do it, or it's just not working. And sometimes things that you're doing don't work, and sometimes things that you're doing do fail. But just like with everything else, if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to go through the changes that it takes to accomplish your goal, you will eventually get there. You may have to pivot a bit, you may have to change a bit, You may realize you're not doing something in the best way, but eventually, if you don't give up, you are going to accomplish the goal that is best suited for you. What I guess I'm trying to do is to encourage you to not give up, and to know that with gardening, just like with any goal, is a long-term game, and that it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. It's not just easy. It's not just like a quick fix, and that to be able to accomplish it, we have to be willing to be forever students of it. You know, every year is different in gardening, and we get different things that we can control, like soil and irrigation and all of the practices that a gardener can learn to do that are completely within our control. And then we have other things that are not in our control, like pests. Certain years are much worse than others, and weather, and you know, we cannot control the weather, and so sometimes the weather gives us failures. For instance, my onion harvest was not what I was dreaming it was going to be, because a lot of my onions bolted, and that's because I had such irregular temperatures early in the spring. We got to 90, and then we went back down and had some freezing temperatures overnight, and so it was just a really crazy year. But I showed up and I did what I could that was within my control, and that's all you can do. I think those failures are just as important, because they teach us as much, if not more, than reading from a book or just having successes. I think I used to tease my kids and say, you know, that when they were complaining about doing something hard, I would say, oh, it builds character. But it actually really does build character. And I think that those are the times that we are the proudest of ourselves, when we actually accomplish something, because we understand so well how hard it was and how much we had to show up and not give up and accomplish and try and work hard for. And those are the accomplishments in life, I think, that mean the most. So all of that is a long-winded way to say that if you don't give up, if you're willing to be a forever student, your garden is going to pay you back way more than you think that she will, even in this desert. These shallots that I'm harvesting right now are the Dutch yellow shallots, and they are smaller than I wanted them to be. I don't know if it's because of the variety, or if it's because they grow hybrids to ship to grocery stores that are just bigger, so maybe my expectations are off. I'm not really sure. That is part of what I'm going to have to research and learn. But that leads me to my next point, and that is that experience builds confidence. And when I first started, I would have been really discouraged about this. Like, oh gosh, I'm just a bad gardener. You know, I had a really bad harvest. As you push through some of those failures and then experience in return the successes, you build your confidence. So my first few garlic crops were not very good, but then I had a great one this year, and I'm feeling a lot more confident, both in my abilities and my knowledge now that I have, but also in my ability to learn and figure things out later. And so even though I may not know right now what to do, I know that I can learn and know what to do in the future. And I think that with any endeavor, as we move along, it builds confidence in us, and it gives us the fuel that we need to be able to pursue what it is that we want to accomplish next. And there is another quote that really expresses that in a much more eloquent way than I did just now, and it's by a man named Brendan Burchard, and he's a speaker and an author, and I just really get a lot of benefit out of listening to him. And the quote says, "No meaningful victory happened without hardship, so do not bemoan the hard work. Don't quit. Be resilient and grow into what you must to overcome." I love that too, because it is just a reminder that we are all beginners when we start out, and that is normal. So don't be embarrassed about being a beginner, and don't feel like you can't do it, because you can. Everyone can learn what they need. So just try to remember that no matter the goal, it's going to be difficult in the beginning, and it's normal. It's normal not to be good at it. It's normal to experience the failure. It's normal to feel discouraged, but it's also really good for you to push through and to keep going. On the opposite end, it's also good for you to know when to quit and when to pivot. So really try to examine what it is you want and why you want it, and whether or not that is good for you and that is a good fit for your life right now. And be honest with yourself. Are you just quitting because it's hard, or are you quitting because it's not a good fit? Just like always, I think that I may have overplanted on the shallots. This is crazy. So I guess that is a lesson to me too, to plan a little bit better. And in gardening, just like in everything in life, you have to plan. So like for instance, right now I'm already planning my monsoon garden. I've got seeds planted in the house. I have my beds mapped out on paper for what I want to plant where, and I'm trying really hard not to overplant. I overplanted probably on the shallots and the onions, but that's all right. I will plant less next time. One of my goals this year is to plan better and to keep better records in the garden, because I think that that will help me be more efficient with the space that I have. And I've been really getting into a method called intensive gardening, and that was done in France. And it was done in France back a long time ago. And I'm going to talk more about that later, but I'm just really fascinated by the fact that the French grew so much food in such a little bit of space, and they did it on the same little piece of land, and rather than depleting that soil, it became richer and richer and more fertile. So I am really interested in transferring that into desert gardening. How can I do the same thing here in the desert? So that will be some content maybe that will be helpful for you coming up in the future. One of the things that I find really fun about gardening is that I have to keep learning, and I get to buy new books and to attend new classes and to listen to new podcasts or videos about how to do something and how to learn whatever it is that I am now setting out to do. And so this year, I guess it's going to be shallots. So as I said, gardening requires you to be a forever student. And I think that is very exciting because it gives you something to look forward to. It gives you a challenge. It gives you something to work towards. And if we didn't have that, life would be a little bit boring. It would get kind of old if we just learned our thing and then we were done and that was it. So I think that really spices life up a bit. All right, I am going to go over here and start harvesting some of these etoy onions. I planted etoy onions, which I got originally from Native Seed Search, and I've just been saving the bulbs every year and then replanting them again. And they are like little multiplier onions. These are really tiny, and they're supposed to be. They're just a little tiny like multiplier onion. And you plant one of these, and just like the shallots, you get multiples that come in this little clump. Once the tops start to dry out, you can harvest those and you can lay them out on a screen and dry them and eat them just like you would shallots or onions. They have a really nice flavor, and it just has performed really well in the Southwest, and I really love it. In fact, if I didn't harvest these and I left the soil undisturbed, the amazing thing about these onions is that they will just chill out in the soil all summer long. You'll forget they're there because the tops will dry completely out and break off and pretty much turn to nothing. But then when the time is right, you will start seeing little green tips coming up again. So if you forget them, or if you're a little late, or if you're just lazy and you want to let them chill out in the soil, chances are they will be okay. You might want to watch a little bit on how much water you put on, because you don't want to promote any rot going on with just these bulbs hanging out in the soil. But I have actually forgotten about where I've planted them in my stock tanks and then had them come up the following spring. So they're really amazing plants. Plants are just amazing because they know when it's time to grow. And that's what they do. When the time is right, when the day length is right, when the temperatures are right, then they kick it into high gear and they just wake up and they produce a beautiful plant, sometimes in spite of our forgetfulness. But I'm not forgetting my etoy onions this year. I'm going to harvest these so that I can eat some, and then so that I I can save some to plant again in the fall because I really, really like these. And they're so tiny and petite that you can plant these in raised beds and in pots or along the borders of your beds. They are really easy to fit in. So if you don't have a lot of room to grow those giant onions like the ones that I was showing you in my garden, you don't have to do that. You can still get some nice fresh onion flavor with some of these little tiny etoy onions. So let's harvest those. I am getting ready to go on a trip back to Ohio, which is where I'm from, and that's because my mother's not doing so well. She's just had some very long-term, long-lasting health problems. So I'm going to go back and assist her. And it will actually be really nice to go back to my hometown. It's always really nice just because there is something really nice about familiarity, you know, and being able to revisit happy memories and all of that. But to do that, I have to prioritize, which is another thing that I wanted to encourage you all to do. You know, life is busy. There's always something going on. Sometimes I think I have ADHD. Like I see one thing I'm supposed to be doing and then I end up doing something completely different. It's like the garden is this time warp and you go out for just a minute or two and then you find that you have been out for like 2 hours. Have y'all noticed that? It's crazy. Confession time. I am so late on harvesting these etoy onions. So late that I'm actually having to dig for some of them because the tops have long since withered away. But I want to use this bed for something else. I don't want to have to worry about these rotting because these are going to be a lot of my planting stock for next year. So I am digging for some of them. So in this case, do as I say and not as I do, and harvest your etoy onions a little bit early. I need to get this bed planted. If I'm going to stay on time with my plan, I need to get this bed planted in some corn and some beans that I have been just dreaming about and sketching on paper. And so if I don't do that before I leave, it will be too late. So all of this has to get harvested, and that way I can actually amend this bed with some compost and then get it all planted with the things that I want to plant. The reason I was so late harvesting these onions is because I actually had surgery about 2 months ago, and it was a pretty hard recovery, had a lot of complications. Everything is fine now, but I was out of the garden for about 7 weeks, and I bet y'all didn't know that because I filmed a lot of things ahead of time and was pretty sneaky about it, but it really set me off track because rather than a 3-week recovery, I ended up having a 7-week recovery. So this garden had to coast for 7 weeks without the gardener, and because of that, a lot of things just got a little overgrown, went to seed. I've got a lot of seed to harvest and a lot of other things to harvest, like these etoy onions and like those shallots that went a little too far. But none the worse for the wear. Sometimes you have to be flexible, you know, and sometimes you just have to prioritize though. I knew that there was a chance of that as I was going into that surgery, so I worked so hard the couple of weeks leading up to it to try to get the garden into a position where it could coast for a while if it needed to, and I'm so glad I did. So even though some of the things are a little overgrown and I have seed that needs to be harvested and I have shallots and etoy onions that have long been overdue with being harvested, there is no harm done. Those things were okay coasting and waiting for me until I was able to do it, and I am so appreciative of my health now for sure. Learning to prioritize has been really helpful for me, not to feel so anxious in the garden. If I can plan ahead and if I can prioritize what actually needs to be done right now, some of the other things can just stay as they are. And sometimes that's hard because I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist out in the garden. I have an idea in my mind of what I want it to look like, and if it doesn't look like that, then it bothers me sometimes. This year it really served me well during the season of my life. I had peas that hung up on the trellis until they were yellow and crispy, and they were starting to dehiss, but I had to embrace that. I didn't have time to pick pick all of them beforehand, so they had to hang a little bit longer, and I ran out of time, honestly. So now I'm having to pivot to the things that really have to be done, that are gonna spoil or, you know, whatever. I put them into 5-gallon buckets so that I could shell them as I had time inside. So they are now in the house safe and sound in a bucket just waiting for me. And then the other part of that row, I ended up having to get a tarp and lay it down in front of the peas and pull the pea vines down so that I did not spill any of those precious pods. And I rolled that tarp up, and I will get those pods off of those dried pea vines from that tarp a little bit later on when I have time. That is resting safely in a dry part of my shed where they can be out of the sun. So that will be just fine. That will wait for me. So I guess part of the garden is learning to prioritize what you plant and what you harvest when. I love planting crops that are like a good patient crop that can wait for me to have time to do things. So for instance, pumpkins are great, and squash, and dried beans, and popcorn, and flour corn. Those can all wait until I have time. All I have to do is get them up and out of the garden and into a safe location, and then I can worry about processing them later because they're dry, so they are not going to spoil and go bad like a batch of tomatoes would. So I have learned over the years to plant a good mix of things that I need to process or eat fresh, and also things that can just be put into my storage room and they can wait for later for me to process those. So that has been really nice. So my goal this week is to get all of the garlic, all of the shallots and onions out and under cover so that they can be curing, and then they can wait for me to come back until later. But what couldn't wait was this bed being planted with my corn and beans, because if I miss that window for monsoon season, then I won't have time for those. It won't be the right season by the time I get back. I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, and it's hard to believe that the desert moves that fast, but it does. If you don't have time to do that, don't be discouraged about that. There are lots of places that will sell transplants like Native Seed Search. They'll be having a monsoon season plant sale coming up really soon, so you can follow them on Instagram or check out their website. They're always really good about publishing that ahead of time. That is about half of my etoy onions, and some of them are a really nice size. So I've got half done and half to go, and then of course there are all my shallots too. I've got to move on to the flowers now so I can collect some of the seed, which I have been working on for a few days. So I've got this 1-gallon bucket just full of the scabiosa seeds, and I've also been collecting Orlea seeds in this big bowl, and I've got one more, and that is the Nigella seeds. And I love these. These seed pods are so cool. So these are definitely going to start falling off, and I don't want to lose all of them because, like I said, I want to sell a few and share a few, but I also want to prevent them from completely reseeding themselves in such a great number that I just have a scabiosa and Orlea farm next year in this bed. So part of it is just practical. I don't want too many of them to fall. I can already see on the ground here that a lot of them have already fallen, so maybe they have planted themselves already in advance for next year and I won't have to do as much work. We'll see. I think collecting and saving seeds from your own garden is such an exciting thing because it's free seed. You grew it yourself. There's something really gratifying about that. TJ brought home a bag of seed packets that he bought at the store just on a whim a couple days ago, and I was looking through this big pile of seed packets, lots of different sunflowers and other things that I just love to plant in the summer garden, but it was reminding me of where I came from in the garden. And when I started gardening as an adult in my own house back in Ohio, we were so broke that I could not afford to buy seed packets, really. So I would wait until the end of the season, and I would buy a few select seed packets when the garden centers there would mark them down to 50%, because seed packets have, you know, a date on them, a sell by date, and so some of those seed packets will be sent back to the seed company, but some of them will be sold by the garden center just at a reduced price. And so I would buy these seed packets for 50% off, but not too many, because I still didn't have enough money to even do that. And each one of them was so precious to me and such a gift. And I would just treat them as if they were gold, because they might as well have been. And now, as I'm sitting here collecting my own seed, I am just feeling so garden rich, because not only am I just harvesting buckets of seeds, but I have more than enough for myself, more than enough to share with other people who are in the same position that I was in all those years ago, and more than enough to put on my website to sell a few too, because everybody's got to pay the bills, right? I do want to say though that the seeds that I sell are select seed varieties, and that's because I purchase a lot of seeds from Native Seed Search, and they give back to a lot of the indigenous communities that are around the Southwest in the form of seeds that they grow out and then return back to them. And I think that that is really important work that Native Seed Search is doing, both in the conservation of varieties, but also in giving back to communities that have stewarded those seeds for generations, and seeds that grow so well and perform so well in our desert environment here. So I would not feel right, I wouldn't feel that it was ethical to sell those seeds on my website, any of those varieties. And so if I suggest a variety to you that came from Native Seed Search or another source like that, I will never sell those seeds. I will never feel right profiting from those myself. I will always suggest that you go back to them, and that if you want to try that variety, that you purchase from them, so that we can continue the support of that organization. So that's a little disclaimer that any seeds that I sell will not be native seeds like that. They are seeds that you could find anywhere, at any garden center probably, and any seed supplier. The difference is that these seeds have been grown over seasons of time in this area, and so hopefully they are a little more adapted each season that goes by to growing and performing well here in the Southwest area. And so I guess that is the benefit of that, as well as, you know, having a little bit of my garden in your garden. I always think that that is so fun to be able to support and grow seeds from a gardener that I follow. And so I have a few of those here, and it's just such a nice feeling that I'm growing seeds that came from their gardens. I've mentioned this before, but as I've gotten older, I understand my dad a little bit better now, because I see now that he wasn't just growing vegetables in his garden for himself to eat, not just for the joy of gardening or for tasty food. He was growing it to share, because he really liked to connect to people that way. And he was always giving bags of produce away to people, you know, people at work and neighbors. And then when I got older and I had my own family, he would bring over bags and boxes of tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and all kinds of things to me. And that really was not only super helpful because we were on such a tight budget, gave us fresh food, but it also provided some other unique opportunities. And one of them is that when my kids were little, they used to watch Thomas the Tank Engine. And I know that was a long time ago. My kids are in their 20s now. They were such big fans of this show, and at the time there was going to be a train ride in our area, and it was supposed to be Thomas themed, and they'd put the little Thomas face on the front of the engine, but we couldn't afford the tickets for this little afternoon train excursion. My dad brought over such a huge truckload of all kinds of tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and zucchini and all of the summer things, way more than I could preserve, way more than I could eat or that my family could eat. And so so we got the idea that we would set up a little farm stand at the end of our driveway, and the neighbors who would pass by, people driving down the street would see it. And we set up a little box, and it was on an honor system, and we put up our little sign with our prices, and we sold those vegetables, the extra ones. And we collected enough money that my kids were able to purchase tickets to go on this little Thomas the Tank Engine train excursion. And we wouldn't have been able to afford that fun afternoon if it hadn't been for my dad's generosity with his vegetables and his passionate overplanting. And so it was also such a great lesson to my kids of, thinking creatively and trying to figure out how to get something that you really want, even though you don't have the funds for it right now. So all in all, it was a really special thing to share with my kids and with my dad, and it's a fond memory that I have. I think one of the gifts of the garden, and there are many, is that it gives us the opportunity to be generous and to pass on, all of the abundance that we have in our gardens, whether it be through sharing knowledge or through sharing produce, food, or through sharing seeds. So there are so many different ways to share, and the garden gives us the opportunity to do that. And I really, really cherish and appreciate that about the garden. And I've talked about it before, about how much I am able to share, and it's because of the garden. As I have been talking to you, this bucket of scabiosa seeds is nearly full. The common name for this is pincushion flower. So I am really looking forward to processing this. One of the things I love about seed saving, at least certain kinds of seed saving and certain kinds of vegetable growing, is that it will wait for you. In a season like this where I have beds to switch out and new things to plant and vegetables to process and seeds to save, all on the heels of, having to recover from a little health thing that I had, I so appreciate certain varieties that will wait for you to have time to process them. And I have to admit, I have got a lot of things inside waiting for me to process and clean. I've got so many different seeds that I have collected that are in buckets, like these flower seeds, many different kinds of flower seeds, as well as peas that need to be shelled. And that's the way it was last fall too. I harvested so many dried beans and cowpeas and popcorn and things like that that were dry, that could just kind of chill out until I had the time over the winter to shell them and process them and clean them. And that's what I would do. I would sit on the couch in the evenings, and instead of watching TV, I would put on some music, and I would shell peas or shell beans, or take the corn off of the cobs or things like that. And I love things like that can wait for you until you're ready or you have time. And that is what these are going to do. They are going to be waiting for me for later on in the season when things slow down. Look at these Orlea seeds. These are such weird little seeds. They're little umbel flowers. They have a little spiky pod on the end of each one of those, and when it's ready, it will split open and split in half, and then the seed will just drop to the ground. I may just end up getting a tarp and cutting down the whole plant and wrapping it up in that tarp and putting it in the shed until I return, because I don't think I'm going to have enough time to harvest all of this and get everything else done before I leave. Wow, look at this Nigella seed. Isn't that the prettiest little seed pod? I think the flowers were so beautiful too, but these are just as pretty. Let me show you some that I already harvested. So let me look. They have these little black seeds here. If you break it open, such a shame to break it open, but I will. So they've got little black seeds in there. Can you see that? So pretty. Look how pretty those are. They just look like little upturned little ladies' dresses, or like little parachutes. They're so pretty. I've got miles to go. Just all of this needs to be harvested, which is why I think I'm gonna have to get out my tarp and do it, because I gotta get moving. I've got other beds to clear and plant. I have heard from people much older than me, and I have also experienced it a bit myself as I am now in midlife and my kids are grown, that sometimes as you get older, it's harder to find things to look forward to. And so maybe that is because you've finished your education, or you have accomplished a lot in your career, or you've had and raised children, or maybe you've met the love of your life and you're in a stable relationship, or you've had lots of travels and experiences. Whatever it happens to be for you, we're all different. But as we move through life and as we accomplish and experience things, it does become a little bit harder, I think, to look forward to things because we've already gotten so much. But in my experience, the garden keeps giving me things to look forward to. And I've talked about some of those things today, looking forward to learning new things or researching things or trying new things. And I am already dreaming about the next season's garden. I've got my plans laid out. I've got my seeds ordered. I have big plans and big dreams. And if there is anything that the garden does for me, it is to give me the space and the opportunity to dream big and to reach a little bit further every season. And so my wish for you is, no matter where you are in your life, whether you're young or you're a little older and you're in your golden years, it is to never stop dreaming and to never stop reaching, whether it's in the garden or elsewhere. Just to look for those spaces and those opportunities that fit your life where you are, where you can still dream and where you can still learn. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I have harvested all of these shallots and all of these etoy onions. I've definitely got my work cut out for me. I've got so many other harvests that I want to share with you that are just coming out of the garden right now faster than I can pick them. And I have so many things that I'm going to be planting for the monsoon garden. So I will be back very soon to share all of that with you. I'm Kara from Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.